Welcome to Ministries That Podcast, where I talk to successful ministry leaders about how they're using podcasting to amplify their mission and grow their ministry so you can too. I'm Tim Hall, your host and owner of Sonomorphic, a podcast production company that specializes in podcasting for ministries. My guest today is Chris Ammen. He's the founder of Kaleidoscope, a ministry that creates resources to help kids get excited about the Bible, and the host of the Kaleidoscope Kids podcast. We're going to talk about his ambitious vision for Kaleidoscope, the role the podcast plays in engaging kids and connecting them to God's Word, and why he's decided to no longer have ads on the podcast. So let's jump right in. Here's my conversation with Chris Ammen. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here.
I first came across the Kaleidoscope Kids podcast around the time it started. I think I saw it on Instagram or I was doing research for possible guests for this show and saw the show was coming and actually listened to the first episode with my oldest daughter and she really enjoyed it. And so we've been listening to the show since about then, which was about July of 2024 is when I saw that it started. And here's a little description for context for those of you listening. Learning the Bible has never been this fun. The Kaleidoscope Kids podcast, designed for kiddos ages 3 to 10, engages growing Bible readers in the good news of God's Word through captivating storytelling, exciting games, and all sorts of silly shenanigans. Your kids will love learning God's Word with Mr. Chris and the team from Kaleidoscope. So I'm glad to have you on the show today, Chris, to hear about your podcasting journey. And to start off, I would love to hear a little look back here. As you look back on this year of podcasting, a little over a year now, how has the podcast helped you amplify your mission and grow your ministry?
You know, as a company, we really started off just doing print books. And over time, we've discovered that kids love audio. And, children have not ceased to be learners. Good news, they are still alive and well in the learning category, but their learning is just shifting as time goes on. And so we've found, the way that we can serve our kids in a different way is through audio. And we've been able to do that through Yodo and through our audio downloads that are really popular on our website and then through the podcast as well. And so the way that I look at the podcast, it hasn't changed much over the past year, but is just another way for us to serve our audience, which are the kids. And if we can keep them engaged in the Bible and learning, and it's done through a podcast that they can get for free, more power to it. I'll be here all day for that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's rewind a little bit and go back to the beginning of the ministry Kaleidoscope. Tell us a little bit about how that ministry came to be, and then we'll get into how the podcast became part of it in a little bit here.
Yeah, so the ministry, really got going back in 2020, right as the pandemic was starting, which we didn't obviously know the pandemic was starting, but there it was, right in our front yard. And so I've been in kids ministry for 15 years, been a kids pastor, and one of the things that I've always noticed with children's ministry is that there's lots of resources for pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, but then as kids get into middle and upper elementary, their reading level is growing, but the resources aren't growing with them. And so I found a lot of kids, third, fourth, fifth grade, who were super excited about learning about Jesus when they were 5 years old, but now they're 9 years old. And their reading level has changed, their tastes have changed, but there's nothing really there for them to support their learning. And so what we did with a lot of kids in that age group was we just handed them a children's Bible, which in most cases is like an NIV or ESV with, colorful doodles in the margins to make it look kiddie. But the NIV and the ESV are both high school level texts. Mm-hmm. And so I found children who were on grade level reading wise, but without a resource to support their growing spirituality. And so I started thinking, man, this is a problem that needs solving. And so the initial idea was, what if the Jesus Storybook Bible didn't have to end? And it didn't have to just be confined to 52 stories. And at the same time, my oldest child, who's now in middle school, was a kindergartner at the time. He was an early reader, He was reading chapter books at the end of kindergarten, just like he's a little child prodigy.
Yeah.
Doesn't get it from me. But, one of the things that I noticed was that he was drifting towards series like Magic Treehouse, Boxcar Children, the kind of these
Yeah.
like serial kind of series. And so I was like, well, what if the Bible could exist in chapter book form as
Hmm.
a series? And that's really where the idea of Kaleidoscope came. And so we started a Kickstarter on March 1st of 2020.
Okay.
We were fully funded on March 10th. And then on March 11th, at least in our area, the world kind of shut down,
Yeah.
which was, on the one hand, a little terrifying looking back on it because we didn't know what was coming. I mean, I think everybody honestly kind of thought, well, we'll just go into our homes for 2 weeks and then we'll come out and everything will be back to normal.
Yeah.
Nobody had any idea it was going to, become what it did. But I always say, I don't think Kaleidoscope would exist without the pandemic.
Hmm.
And so what it did for me as a full-time kids pastor was it gave me 8 months where I didn't have a kids ministry to attend to.
Hmm.
And I got to sit in my basement and put all my time and effort and energy into starting this company. And I think parents also had this awakening during the COVID where the church can't be everything for my child. I've got to invest at home. So, through kind of a series of fortunate events, I think the Lord really put Kaleidoscope in motion in a very unexpected time.
Yeah. That's nuts that the timing was that exact.
Yes.
And it all lined up well. Only God does things like that, huh?
I know, right?
Yeah. So, what was your relationship with podcasts at that time?
Yeah, I think at that point, back in 2020, I hadn't really even discovered podcasts.
Okay.
I wasn't really big into podcasting. And honestly, back in 2020, we weren't really even into audio. Audio didn't come along for us until about 2 years ago. So, we started getting this idea to start doing audio. And I actually launched a second Kickstarter as a company. Not that we necessarily needed the funds to do audio, but we just wanted to kind of raise awareness
Sure.
amongst our community that we were going to kind of take our books and make them into audiobooks.
Yeah.
And my initial idea was, what if we could put all of our books on Spotify? Because for me, at least at that point, that was the podcasting platform that I was most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback from our customers as we went into that Kickstarter was absolutely not.
Interesting.
We do not want Kaleidoscope books on Spotify because we don't want to have to give our children devices to listen to them.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went back to the drawing board. We pulled down the Kickstarter after a couple days because it was very obvious that we were not going to hit our goal and we didn't want to deal with that embarrassment.
Yeah.
And along the way, a couple people sent us emails and they were like, have you heard of Yodo? Like, we really want, we'd love for you guys to look into Yodo. At that point, I had never heard of Yodo. Ended up looking into them. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And for those of you who don't know, like it's a screen-free audiobook player for kids where you can really control what your child listens to and doesn't listen to. And the audio lives on these little cards that your children have. And so we approached Yodo and we're like, hey, would you want to work together? And they were like, probably not. And really behind it all was at that time they had a policy that they wouldn't publish religious content. And so we were like, okay, well, we've figured out problems before. This is no different. And so we started putting our audio content on make your own cards for Yodo.
Yeah.
Which ended up kind of crashing their system because we did it the wrong way. And long story. Anyway, we ended up showing them our numbers after a couple of months. And they were like, wow, this is really great. We think there's probably a market here. And I was like, yeah, I told you so. No, I didn't say that. But we became the first biblical content for Yodo at that point, and we're off to the races with them doing audio content.
Nice. Yeah. So at what point along that journey, you're talking to Yodo, figuring out the card thing and how to get the audiobook on Yodo players. At what point did you decide maybe a podcast would be a good avenue as well to pursue?
Yeah. So I ended up meeting this guy, Chris Starrett, who is still our producer. He runs the Good Podcast Company.
Yeah.
And we were at the Gospel Coalition Women's Conference back a couple of years ago. I guess this would have been 2024.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had in the back of my mind that, what else could we do with this audio content?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have all this stuff that's recorded now. How can we deploy it in different ways? And Chris and I met at the conference and got to talking, just built a really quick relationship. And we both kind of were like, well, what if we just did a podcast? And I could do a little bit of teaching around it, but then we have this content that we're already putting on Yodo cards. What if we took that content and included it as a part of the podcast? And it would just be another place that content could live. And so, I mean, it all happened really fast. Like it was a idea that went from an idea to an actuality within a couple months. And we were off to the races with the Good Podcast Company, and they still produce all of our episodes. And I send content to Chris every week, and he does his little magic.
Nice.
And every Monday morning, you get a new episode of the Kaleidoscope Kids podcast.
That's great. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that process that you took from, hey, I have this idea, to actually making it happen. There's obviously some moving pieces that happen in there. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration for the show, and then how you came up with the different segments that you developed into what the show is now.
Yeah. I knew from the beginning that it's got to be short. So all of our episodes are 15 minutes or shorter. Even 15 for some kids is getting a little bit long. But I think my instincts just kind of took over in terms of what to do for the podcast, because I've been teaching kids for 15 years.
Yeah.
And the Mr. Chris character that you hear on the podcast is really the same Mr. Chris that our kids hear every Sunday at church.
Nice. Yeah.
It's not that much different. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same voice. I have a character that I go into. My kids make fun of me for it. But it just kind of, like, what you hear on the podcast is not too dissimilar from how I teach our kids at church. And so it's real fast, real quick, rapid fire. We don't leave a lot of dead time. It's just ba-boom, 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 on to the next. And I do a lot of games like I do with our kids at church.
Sure.
I try to make the teaching engaging and exciting. The one challenge with the podcast when it comes to doing games is that you're so limited in what you can do over audio without being in person with children. And so that has been a challenge to kind of come up with games that, work in podcast form, but that aren't too repetitive, aren't too boring, and all that. So that has been challenging. But honestly, if you came to our church on a Sunday morning and you listened to the podcast, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's great. So one thing that's interesting, and I think is great about your show, is that you do a bunch of audience participation pieces. You have the trivia quizzes that are basically like comprehension quizzes that you're asking kids, but they get to submit their answers and have a chance to win a prize with that. They can submit jokes and riddles. And my daughter, Etta, actually submitted a joke and was so excited when it was on the podcast. And so I would love to know, too, how did that develop over time as you started asking for questions at the beginning and starting to get those in? And how has that helped engage listeners?
Yeah. I think at every turn in the road of our business, I've just always thought, how can we get all the juice out of this lemon? And how can we engage our audience the most with this piece of content? And so the idea to do a podcast quiz that would bring people to our website where they might also see something that they want to buy was an idea that we kind of had from the beginning as what's the end game? What's the end game of them listening to this? Obviously, we want them to learn the Bible, love Jesus, but we'd also love for them to buy our products and support the ministry that we're doing and learn more about what we're doing and all that stuff. And so the easy way for us to get them there was to do something that brought them to our website, like a podcast quiz. And then the jokes, I don't even know where that came from. I think it was just, I listen to a lot of podcasts now that involve audience participation and where they take audience questions and stuff like that. And I thought, man, this would be so cool for a kid to hear their name and their joke on this
Yeah.
podcast and think, oh my gosh, I'm famous for, 15 seconds. Honestly, I think that's probably just where it came from was how can I involve children
Yeah.
in this show without necessarily having them on the show, but make them feel like they're a small part of what we do.
Mm-hmm. And it gives them a reason to want to come back and listen to the next episodes as well to hopefully hear their joke or their riddle or whatever. So yeah, great way to continue that conversation basically with the kids. So the first season of the podcast, you're in season 3 now, and the first season of the podcast, you went through the book of Acts. And I'd love to know why that was the best place you thought to start instead of like the Gospels or in Genesis.
I think because Acts is my favorite book of the Bible.
Okay. Yeah.
Honestly, I think it was a little bit selfish in that regard. I love Acts. Acts was also the first volume of Kaleidoscope that we ever put out. And so there's a little bit of nostalgia for me with that of starting in Acts. And as kids explore the New Testament, I see Acts as a really pivotal book. So it's, the end result of everything that happened in the Gospels of Jesus' ministry and how, the disciples are now sent out to the ends of the earth, at least the ends of the earth that they knew at that point in time. And then all of the letters afterwards, and, they find their roots in the book of Acts. And so, kids can read, 1 Timothy and understand a little bit more about 1 Timothy because they understand where Paul and Timothy were in the book of Acts. And so I think it kind of sets up the rest of the New Testament for children really well.
Nice. Yeah. So curious, do you think you're going to go through all of the books of the Bible? And if you did every chapter, it's going to be over 1,000 episodes, right? So what's the plan as far as how you roll this out?
The plan is to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm alive and as long as kids are still listening, we will keep producing episodes. And so, Tim, we might very well put out more than 1,000 episodes in the long run, and that would be a really, really beautiful thing. I would love to know who's going to listen to this season on Micah or Nahum. Like, that's going to be a committed few people. But man, if they're listening, we'll keep putting them out.
That's great. Yeah. So that plays into the vision for Kaleidoscope. And I saw on your website that Kaleidoscope is a growing company with multiple writers, illustrators, and a vision to produce over 60 volumes by the year 2028. So tell us a little bit about that vision and how the podcast plays into that.
Yeah. So we're putting out 4 new books a year. Some of them are compilation kind of books where we put a couple of books of the Bible together. We have one on Joel, Jonah, and Amos that are all in one volume. So some of the shorter books are put together. Some of the longer books we split apart. Like we're doing Psalms in 3 volumes.
Sure, yeah.
Psalm 119 will get a volume all by itself. No, that's a joke that we have internally. But yeah, we're just going to keep putting out volumes until we're done. It might be 2028. It might be longer than that. I'm not sure. But we continue to work with our team of writers to produce those books. And honestly, Tim, I see the podcast as just one more way that we can serve kids.
Yeah.
Like I have been really, really clear from the beginning, both with myself and with our team, that we are in this to make money to the extent that it supports the mission that we're doing. And so as long as the podcast is supporting the mission of what we're doing, I don't look at the podcast as a money-producing vehicle. I look at it as a way for us to serve our customers and to come to them. I think sometimes companies run astray and kind of turn their backs on their customers in some ways when every time they come to them, it's like, hey, would you like to buy the next thing? Would you like to buy the next thing? And what we want to do is, we want to come to you every once in a while and say, hey, here's the next thing we'd love for you to purchase. But we'd also like to be like, hey, here's this free thing that we just wanted to give you with nothing in return. Like I remember when we started the podcast, one of my wife's questions was, well, if you're going to put the content that you have on your Yodo cards in podcast form, don't you think that's going to hurt the Yodo card sales? And I was like, maybe. I don't know, and I frankly don't quite care. Like if it does, but we're able to support the ministry and able to get the gospel out to more kids, like let's do it.
Yeah. So I'm curious how the Yodo player has, and the building those cards and that collaboration has evolved over time. Has that still continued to be a great resource that people are engaging with? Or has the podcast kind of capitalized on that a little bit? What have you seen?
Yeah. So, back at the beginning, obviously we were a book business. And
right.
then when we got into doing Yodo cards, I was like, well, we'll be a book business that has Yodo cards as a supplement to what we're doing. And what's happened over time is that functionally we are a Yodo card business that also sells books.
Huh.
So I was looking at numbers just the other day, and I think over the past 90 days, 80% of our sales have been Yodo cards.
Wow.
So it's now the breadwinner for everything that we do. And the books are still something that we're committed to, but it is by no stretch of the imagination the main thing that we do anymore.
Gotcha. You're creating the books that then become the audiobooks, which are the content on the cards.
That's right.
So like all those pieces obviously play together, but that's incredible that it went from, hey, we're writing these books, let's record them and make audiobooks, to, hey, let's look at this Spotify thing. Okay, so that's not a good solution. Let's go to Yodo. And then that has kind of blown up and become overwhelmingly the main way that people are engaging with the content that you're creating. That's really cool. So Chris, as the Yodo player stuff has gone really well and people are listening to the podcast and there's kind of that bridge there as well, tracking purchases from the podcast or the conversion numbers of people that are engaging with this free content, then they might come and purchase one of the books or one of the Yodo cards is tricky. Podcasting and tracking is hard. So I'd love to know, how have you found to be the best way to help track that conversion and know that, hey, the podcast is still helping drive towards the other resources that we're creating?
Yeah. The short answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
And if anybody out there listening has a good way to track that, I'd be all ears. We can track certain things through coupon codes and stuff like that, but then you take a hit. Like you provide a coupon code to get the data, but then you're taking a hit on the bottom line. So, is that worth it to you to get that data? Honestly, before the podcast, we advertised on a lot of podcasts, and that was great. It was also frustrating too, because of the very thing that you just asked about tracking.
Right.
You're like, well, is it worth it to advertise on this podcast? I don't know. Maybe. And so with our marketing person that we have, I just always kind of emphasize to her, as long as we're going up and to the right and we're spending our money on things that we think are effective at getting our ministry out to more people, and as long as our bottom line is growing to support what we're doing, I'm good with that. I don't need to know that this investment equals X dollars. That's not, I think we'll paralyze ourselves and waste time doing that. And so honestly, at the end of the day, podcasting is cheap. It's inexpensive. I mean, once you buy the hardware and for us, we have a production company, but you don't need a production company to do a podcast, but it's not overly expensive. And so if it's a way that we can serve our customers for, the price that we pay, it makes a lot of sense to us to do it. It's something that I enjoy. Like, I love teaching kids and I love having another venue to teach. And so it's, in some ways, it's like a little passion project of mine.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's going really well.
Thanks.
So what have you found? So you were saying, as you talk to your marketing person, what have you found to be some good ways to help get the word out about the ministry and the podcast and help get that everything going up and to the right?
Yeah. We rely a lot on word of mouth. And so we do a lot through social media where people share our content. And we genuinely think that if you put out good content, you don't have to ask people to share it. People just share it.
Sure. Yeah.
And so sometimes when you're like, hey, everybody share this and tell your friends about this, and it can look really desperate. And like, we just think if you put out a quality product, people will naturally share it. Another thing that we do that we've seen a lot of great traction from this year is we do a lot of free resources on our website.
Okay.
And so we have a girl on our team who one of her hats that she wears is just a creator of free stuff.
Nice.
And so she'll like create word searches and she'll create little printable games that families can play. And we use those as lead magnets to get people on our email list. And then once they're on our email list, we can start a conversation with them where we're able to introduce the podcast and other things to them. So we really see providing quality resources and not always asking for something in return is the best way to grow for us.
How have you found to be some good ways to help get the message out? Because your main audience that you're reaching is kids, and they're not the people on social media or texting it to their friends. So I'm guessing it's a lot on the parents. So what have you found to be the best way to help mobilize the parents then to help reach their kids?
So if you follow us on social media, you know that we post a lot of stuff for parents. Some kids ministries post a lot of stuff for kids, which is great. We know that our audience, at least on social, is parents. And more specifically, 95% of our followers are female. And so because of that, I've hired an all-female team around me because I'm not one, not a female. And so I want to trust their instincts on what women want. And so we write a lot of articles and posts and stuff that really address the particular anxieties and questions of parents rather than here's, how the book of Esther applies to kids. We're going to post stuff like, how do you think about your teens and technology or your, Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift just got engaged a few days ago. And so we were like, well, parents are probably having conversations with their kids about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And so when we become a trusted resource for parents, meeting their felt needs and their, desires and questions, like, oh yeah, by the way, they might trust us to speak to their kids as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of our tactic.
Nice. Yeah. Along with that, you also advertise on the podcast, and you started doing that at some point along the way. So I'd love to know when that was that you realized, hey, let's start advertising. But one of the ads that I heard was for Dwell, and it was specifically focused on the parents. It was a pre-roll ad at the very beginning for Dwell. You're pointing people to go check out their plans or whatever over there that's specifically for parents, because otherwise they're showing up for the kids' content that's coming right after that. So at what point did you decide to add sponsorships and then promote something to parents that are playing the episodes for their kids?
Yeah. At the beginning of the podcast, we decided to do ads. We actually gave them away at the beginning. I think like Storymakers got some either free or very, very inexpensive ads. Like I'm good friends with them, and I've joked with them that they made the best investment that they've ever made with those first few, because they're evergreen episodes. They live forever. And honestly, I just wanted to create some like proof of concept that this podcast was actually going to work and have some listeners before I went out to people like Dwell and Tiny Theologians and others, and it was like, hey, this might actually be worth you spending real dollars on. And so we wound up getting some sponsors, and like a lot of that sponsorship is speaking to the parent. Like we imagine a scenario where you're driving in the car and the parent listens to the ad. By the way, parent, like, well, you're also tuning in here. Here's something for you. Yeah. And then child, here's your show. Now we have pretty recently, at the end of last season and into this season, we've pulled all of our sponsorships. So my goal with the sponsorships was just to cover the production cost of the podcast. So it wasn't a drain on the company. And over time, what I began to sense internally, nobody told me this, but I began to sense internally that I just didn't want to do ads anymore.
Okay.
like like I wasn't passionate about it. I was having to chase down sponsors all the time, having to
Yeah.
get their ad copy from them at the very last minute. And it just ended up kind of being, it was just one more thing for me to do.
Sure.
And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it was just covering the production cost. I wasn't making any money off the ads. And I started thinking, I wonder if parents and kids would appreciate an ad-free kind of podcast. And there's another podcast that I listen to called The Diary of a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And Steven on that podcast, like he says all the time, like we're trying to keep our ads down. Like we're trying to not do ads. And really what we want y'all to do is to tell other people about the podcast. And that's the way that more people are going to learn about
Right.
what we're doing. And I was like, there's something here that I think looks more like partnership with parents of if you love what we're doing, be a part of what we're doing. Like follow us, like us, subscribe, do all that stuff so this gets out to more and more people. And then at the end of the day, more people are going to come to our website. More people are going to, be in the Kaleidoscope ecosystem. Like that small amount that I was getting from podcast advertising is nothing compared to the potential upside of not having podcast ads. And so we've gone that direction of not doing podcast ads. And at this point, I don't think I'll go back. I think this works for us and makes a lot of sense for the setup that we have.
Yeah, that's good insight. What other advice would you have for ministry leaders who are thinking about starting a podcast or already starting a podcast from the year that you've already been doing it?
So we really jumped into podcasting pretty quick. Went from idea to first episode within just a few months. I wish at the beginning that I had spent a little bit more time developing the show.
Okay.
And so this is probably one of those things that's like noticeable to only me. But I know that the way that I think about the show now, the way that I use my voice on the show, use the assistant on the show, and just, think about everything that we're doing is a little bit different than those first few episodes. And I think that's the case with most podcasts, that you kind of find your voice after a season or two. And so, most podcasts, you go back and listen to the first season, you're like, oh, this sounds different than what I'm used to now.
Yeah.
And honestly, probably the podcast will sound different in a year or two from now than it sounds now, because I'll continue to kind of find what works for us. But I do wish that I had spent a couple months just like recording shows and just sharing them with close friends in our team and getting feedback of what works. Should I talk faster here? Should I talk slower here? Is this too long, too short? All of those little things, make those kind of tweaks, get it as good as you can get it before you go into that first episode. Because that first episode is going to be your most listened to episode of everything. At least that's what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
First impressions are everything. Like if you can make a good first impression in those first 10 seconds of a show, you've probably got yourself a listener. If they feel like, I don't really like his voice, he's talking too fast, he's talking, like you could lose them real quick. And so that first episode, rather than like, a pilot episode, look at it as like, we want this to be our, like, as good as we can possibly get it.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Specifically, just recording something and sharing it and getting that feedback. Because otherwise you get going and you realize how things are starting to work or not work and change it then, which isn't necessarily bad. But if you can get that on the front end, that's always beneficial. So what are some opportunities, Chris, that you've had over the last year since you started the podcast that you may not otherwise have had?
I mean, talking to people like you, just kind of being more in the podcasting world and community.
Sure.
Honestly, I think a lot of the opportunities that I've had, I don't even know that I've had. Like I've gotten to be a voice in children's lives that I don't know and will never meet.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like I'm currently right now in my recording studio. I come in here once a week to record the podcast and like my clothes are like right here. And it's just this really humble kind of thing. But this podcast goes out to thousands of kids all over the world. That's an enormous opportunity and responsibility. And so I think just getting to be a part of families' lives that I'll never meet is is really extraordinary.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Chris, what are you most excited about for the future of Kaleidoscope as a brand and then as the podcast as well?
I think we always want to be on the cutting edge of new media. And so I feel like we got in pretty early with Yodo,
Yeah.
and we're always looking for kind of what's the next thing that we could get on board with that would help get the Bible to kids in the places where they already are. Like, that was the beautiful thing about Yodo, was like, they're already here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's get them the Bible where they already want to go. I I had a pastor that I used to work for, and he used to say that ministry for him, it was the principle of turkey hunting, which if you've ever been turkey hunting, you're just calling a turkey to where he already wants to go. And so I think for Kaleidoscope, like, we just always want to call kids to where they already want to go.
Mm.
And so I think that's really the future. So we're just going to keep following God in that, and letting our customers really tell us where they want us to go as well.
Nice. That's great. We'll jump into the high pass segment now, where we ignore the lows and I ask you about some of your favorite things. So first question, Chris, is what is your favorite podcast right now?
Yeah. So I don't actually listen to a lot of Bible podcasts or ministry podcasts in general. I used to listen to Mega. Have you ever listened to Mega?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh. My wife used to give me so much grief for listening to Mega because it is so inappropriate. But it's this podcast that it's like a parody on a mega church podcast.
Okay.
I mean, for your listeners, if they go and listen to it and are highly offended, I'm so sorry, but you did it to yourself. I'm warning you right now, but it's so funny. So anyway, the podcast that I actually listen to now that I really enjoy are, one of them is called The Pitch. Which is a startup podcast. So I love startup companies and just kind of learning about that world. I was an early watcher of Shark Tank and all that. The Pitch is basically a Shark Tank for podcasts. And so I love that. I love this new show that I found called 99% Invisible, which is kind of explores like the world around us that we don't notice, but has a really unique story behind it. And so I love podcasts where I get to learn about an area of the world or a concept or a person that I'm like, not in a million years would I have dreamed that was interesting, but that's really cool. So I love podcasts like that.
Nice. Yeah. All right. What's one of your favorite family activities to do in the fall that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. So we live in Chattanooga, which is beautiful, beautiful location. We love being outdoors, playing sports, going for hikes, doing stuff like that. Our boys are both in sports right now. One of our sons is running cross country and the other is playing soccer. And this fall, we're really excited. We're going to take a family trip out to the Grand Tetons.
Nice. Yeah.
This fall for fall break, and hike around and see beautiful scenery and all of that. For three of them, it'll be their first time on an airplane. Cool. So they're actually most excited about the airplane, less excited about the mountains and the cool stuff that they'll see. And they're talking a lot about which soda they're going to order when they're on the plane.
That's great. So, all right, what's one of your favorite stories from a listener about how the Kaleidoscope Kids podcast has impacted their life?
Okay, so a lot of kids, if you listen to the show, there's my assistant.
Yeah.
And my assistant is a kazoo, because we're adults here. Everybody knows that this is not a real thing. So it's just the producer who goes into his studio and records himself literally blowing into a kazoo. And so when I go to like homeschool conferences, like we go to a lot of conferences where kids are actually there, like kids will come up to me and be like, "Where's the assistant? Is the assistant come with you?" I'm like, "I don't know. I think he's lurking around here somewhere." But it's just this like funny thing. And every once in a while, like my nephew listens to the show, and he's like, "That sneaky assistant. He was up to things this week, wasn't he?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have to get rid of him. He's a real pain in the neck." So I think like that, just that fun like interplay and dialogue that we get to have with kids about this fictitious character that they think is real, like it's like a Santa Claus figure to them. It's real fun.
Nice. Yeah. Well, Chris, as we close, who else do you think would be a great guest for this podcast?
There's a gal, I'm missing her name right now, but Kids Bible Stories. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, Jessica White.
Yeah, have you had her on the show?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I talked to her and her husband early on the podcast. Yeah, they could do great work as well.
Yeah, they're really great, and really appreciate the work that they do. I know you've had a lot of my friends on the show, like Hunter Belis has been on the show with you, and I'd love to see you do some stuff with like JT English and Kyle Worley. They're really great. I feel like they're just so solid. Like they're just, I trust, they're people just like me and you, but man, I trust what they say. Yeah. What they say is so thoughtful. And I think that they would be great for your listeners.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've reached out to the Knowing Faith team, and hopefully we'll have an interview with Kyle in the new year. He's got a lot going on. But yeah, hoping to have him on the show. So Chris, thank you again for taking the time to be on the podcast today. Really appreciate hearing about your podcasting journey and all that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate you. And maybe the answer to that last question is that you need to be a guest on your own show. And you need to have somebody come on and ask you all the questions.
Interesting idea, Chris. I like it. All right. We'll see you later, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
It was great to talk with Chris about Kaleidoscope and how the podcast has been a great addition to their ministry of creating resources to help kids get excited about the Bible. And I'm still surprised that 80% of their revenue comes from the Yodo cards. That really gets me excited about the future of podcasting as kids are enjoying audio content and using their imaginations instead of just staring at a screen. You can listen to the Kaleidoscope Kids podcast with the link in the show notes. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Ministries, the podcast, produced by Sonomorphic. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow or subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. That's the best way to support this show, and together we'll help more ministries grow and thrive through podcasting. Now come back in 2 weeks to hear my conversation with Holly Mackle. She's the host of Unseriously, a classical school librarian, and the author of several books. We're going to talk about where the idea for asking quirky questions of notable normals came from, creating the custom theme song for her show, and her best advice for starting a podcast right now. Well, until next time, keep encouraging your audience as they follow Jesus.